Darling in the Franxx episode 18 aired, and here's the basic rundown.
Horny people have no rights. Horny people are not protected under the Constitution. If you are horny, I will find you, and then you will be sorry, Buster.
Or, if you're a crazy person, the summary might be more like this. This thread is by Jacob Chapman, the associate editor of Anime News Network, and he has a very strange idea of the politics behind Darling in the Franxx. So I wanted to go through this thread and kinda decipher his mental breakdown. You know, now that Darling in the Franxx has finally tipped its hand as right-wing propaganda, I fucking called it, it's interesting to see how it contrasts with our Western equivalents of this stuff. It's very different, because it's motivated by totally different factors. So Darling in the Franxx is right-wing propaganda. Got it, let's see how he elaborates on this. For one thing, it's not religiously motivated. Darling in the Franxx isn't mourning the death of the patriarchal structures because it makes the baby Jesus cry, or any god cry for that matter. The most interesting difference to me between American patriarchal fearmongering and Japanese ones is that ours is based in preventing chaos, while Japan's, or at least Darling in the Franxx especially, is based in preventing homogeny and stagnation. Basically, both prey on the fear of something that already exists in the nation and blame it on irrelevant vulnerable minorities and the fear of change. American patriarchal fearmongering is based on preventing chaos, while Japan's is based in preventing homogeny and stagnation. While it's true that Japan has a long-lasting problem with low birth rates, I don't think Darling in the Franxx is propaganda of any sort for countering this problem. Unless, of course, Jacob is saying that there's a ploy by the entire anime industry that's being ran by the Japanese government to get people to reproduce by watching romantic shows somehow. But considering the average charisma and looks of the average weeb, both in Japan and abroad, I'm pretty sure it's not the case. Also, were the anime industry fuckery conspiracy true, it wouldn't be pointless, since low birth rates are a real problem in Japan, and actually in most of the developed world. But let's keep going with this thread instead of global population crisis. I'm also unsure as to what he means by saying homogeny. Does he mean homosexual relationships or Japan's nearly racially homogeneous population? I don't know, so let's just continue. America is confrontational and violent already, so if Christian flicks about the death of Christmas or the gay agenda or whatever claim that this encroaching diversity will erode traditional family and make those problems worse, they're taking away your security. I don't think any actually intelligent person thinks that gays are a threat to the traditional American family values. I'm not saying there isn't anyone who thinks this, because I mean, I'm reading your thread, so I'm willing to believe anything at this point. Due to declining birth rates and increasing social isolation both between and within generations, Japan is more worried about going quietly into that good night, and their governing body isn't dominated by a specific religious ideology like America's Christian nation thing. Again, social isolation is a real issue in Japanese society, so if this propaganda conspiracy was real, which it very clearly isn't, would it be a bad thing? So instead of women's rights or the abolition of socially enforced gender roles, taking away your security, Darling in the Franxx posits a world where it takes away your happiness, Brave New World style. The reference to Brave New World is accurate. I haven't read the book, but a quick Wikipedia summary shows that it tackles similar themes of eliminating human reproduction as Darling in the Franxx does. But the rest just results in raised eyebrows? Somehow, allowing men and women to explore gender diversity or decide not to have children would create a society where people no longer feel emotions or have any fulfillment in their incredibly safe lives. Somehow, it creates more ennui and homogeny. Okay, so we don't know at this point what led to the creation of the Brave New World style society of Darling in the Franxx, and this explanation is definitely stretching it. But I can say with damn near 100% certainty that the reason wasn't sexual diversity and non-traditional gender roles. Even though it seems like the total opposite of common sense, and even though it plays like the total opposite of the "you're being intolerant of my intolerance" American right-wing stuff, it's accomplished the same goal of blaming current fears of boogeymen, of progressivism, The children's feelings of ennui are based on their pondering of what their purpose in life is, because they don't want to just pilot giant fucking robots all day. Jacob seems to think that just because there is no mutually gay relationship in Team 13, it means that being gay is bad somehow. which based on what we learned about Ikuno in episode 18, definitely isn't true. Ichigo declines her, but in the best way in the history of TV storytelling. Ikuno's homosexuality isn't painted as weird or gross, but as just the same as Ichigo's relationship with Hiro. To me, this just goes to show that patriarchal structures exist outside of specific religious ideologies or even social priorities. America's economic conservatism could not be more different from Japan's economic socialism, and the same is true for our attitudes towards religion. Giving women the freedom to work instead of breed, or hey, maybe do both and have a stay-at-home dad, letting gay people marry, or letting your girlfriend peg you now and again, would never lead to FranXX's dystopian society. But that's what makes it propaganda. So what makes Darling in the Franxx propaganda is a theory you yourself crafted out of your own delusions. Jacob also goes on about choice for women, but it was Kokoro's choice. She wants to have a child. So, shouldn't you be promoting that? You are right though, basic liberal values will not create a dystopia. Also, don't kink shame this guy. Even though it's wildly different from right-wing propaganda in America, Darling in the Franxx takes current-day social anxieties, exaggerates them, and poses that the solution is to double down on the status quo even harder, framing oppression of others as true rebellion. He thinks the show is saying that liberal values will lead to the dystopia Darling in the Franxx presents, even though we've established that that's not the case. Heck, you can't get much more liberal than Hiro. His girlfriend is a half-dinosaur. It's also apparent that his knowledge of Japanese economics is as good as mine, so let's ignore that one. It's fascinating and awful, but there is some consolation in that, like all propaganda, it doesn't hold up to scrutiny under its shiny surface. FranXX can't help but have bad characterization, and confusing world building because its thesis is built on lies about humanity. A thesis which you built, not the show. The only reason you came to the conclusion that Darling in the Franxx is somehow right-wing propaganda, it's because Ikuno and Ichigo didn't become a couple. That doesn't make the show anti-liberal. To call Darling in the Franxx propaganda, it's like saying Uma Musume is propaganda for gambling. But the funniest part about this whole thing is that I could have just thumbed my video up with this meme.
Darling も書いたんでしょ？
いやこれは
見せてって。
ダメ。
見せろ！
だから見せたくなかったんだ。